You know what most people feel like when they wake up Christmas morning, Jake?
Oh, yeah.
That is the same feeling you got this morning when you woke up this morning on draft day.
It was.
Draft day is finally here. The 2017 NFL Draft. The same thing that Jake has been looking forward to since February of 2013.
Yep.
How you feeling today, Jake?
You kind of hit it on the head there with the feeling of Christmas, but now that knowing that I get 3 days of this, it's kind of like a mini Hanukkah. So, I mean, we get 3 days of draft frenzy. I'm ready. I'm stoked. I've been ready for this for months.
Well, I want to welcome everybody. This is San Diego Sports Junkies, and we are doing the show live from the estate of Jake Hefner up in Yorba Linda. Got in the car today, drove through customs, got through the through the background check and everything, and I made it over here. And I appreciate you inviting me up here. It's I've been looking forward to this for a long time, seeing how you do the draft. I understand that it's a big deal, and you kind of have a party every year for like the last 7 or 8 years.
8 years, yeah. Since Ryan Matthews was taken in 2010, that was the first year we did it.
Wow. So I'm looking forward to the draft. It should be a lot of fun. Just kind of with a big group of people. It's kind of neat. I watched the draft last year at Cali Comfort, and it's really neat when you go in and you see the draft with a big group of people, and you get to kind of cheer and get excited like it's an NFL football game, you know. And it's so funny how the draft for the NFL is an event, you know. And I know there's one sound that you've been waiting to hear. I wanted to play this sound real quick, something you've been waiting to hear for a while. And that, of course, is the sound of...
Church bells.
Yes.
Church bells.
Exactly. So we'll get right into it. There's not... we've been talking about the draft now for weeks and weeks and months now. Cleveland's got the first pick. We had talked earlier. I was kind of hoping to see all the quarterbacks go off the board early, because in my mind, the quarterbacks going early meant that there was more of all the other positions available when the Chargers got to draft. You kind of changed my mind on that, Jake, because I every year want to see the Chargers trade down, or most years I want to see the Chargers trade down. And if quarterbacks are available when the Chargers draft, there's more opportunity for other teams to trade up. So starting with Cleveland, do you look at them? You look at them trading a quarterback, or is there something you've been hearing more recently they're going to go a different direction?
For Cleveland, it's sounding like every indication is going to be Myles Garrett at number 1, which should come as no surprise to anybody. Even though there was a part of me during today that I was hoping that Cleveland was going to take Mitchell Trubisky and really just throw a huge wrench in this draft, make a shockwave that just transcends everybody's other game plans as far as what's going to happen overall. But Cleveland's making the right move here and doing what they're going to be doing and taking Myles Garrett. There's no doubt about it. He is the best player in this draft, deserving of the number 1 pick. And we'll see what they do when they come back around from 12. That's a whole different story as far as the action that they'll be looking to get back into the top 10, possibly be looking to pick up their quarterback at that point.
Now, just for fun, let's say Cleveland does not draft Myles Garrett. Any chance at all of him dropping to 7?
I like you, man. I like it when you make humorous puns like that. I'll just keep that as my answer.
No chance at all. No chance at all of him dropping to 7. I see a lot of the mock drafts. I've been looking at. They've been showing Malik Hooker going pretty early, like 3 or 4. I know that we've been talking about Hooker and Adams to the Chargers possibly at 7. And you've always, so far, I don't know if you changed your mind. You've always said 1A and 1B. You'd take either one of them. But out there on the draft boards, it looks like Hooker is the favorite of the two of them. Do you agree with that, or do you still see them as pretty equal?
And Justin and I had talked about this for months, that we were on the Hooker bandwagon for a long period of time. And I came around and I switched it to Jamal Adams. And I took it just from the standpoint of more consistent years of production. The guy is a locker room leader. His tackling abilities are some things that Hooker has not really put on. Hooker's a center field guy. He obviously creates the turnovers. That's where Jamal Adams has his weaknesses, is that he's not a turnover machine. So that's where all the attention goes with Malik Hooker and what he does and what he brings to a field. So obviously you want all these qualities from a safety. But from the standpoint of consistency, I think what the Chargers secondary ultimately needs, I think they would do right to get themselves Jamal Adams if they had a choice between the two. Now, there's going to be... there is going to be a good situation to where the Chargers may not have either a choice of getting any of these guys,
right?
Considering what the buzz has been like lately. And then if you watch Mike Mayock's draft show from last night when he released his mock draft, it was one of the few ones that was really, really different, where Malik Hooker was down in the teens.
Wow!
So that was really the first one that I had seen that was very different from all of this, symmetry in having the Chargers take Malik Hooker at 7. So, I mean, we'll see. But, yeah, I mean, safety obviously is a huge priority for the Chargers, but it's deep enough in this draft to where you can always circle back around the early part of the second round and pick somebody up of quality stature there.
Well, I'll have to disagree with you a little bit, actually, on those two guys. And just because when you mentioned Malik Hooker, now you've seen these guys a lot more than I have, let's be honest here. I haven't really watched any film on either one of them. But just going by what you said, with Malik Hooker being more of a center field, type safety, that to me seems like it'd be a better fit with the Chargers, with Jaleel Addae being the other safety. That's really not his strength. He's more of a coming up and hit the guys, put the fear into the people, but coverage is not his strength, honestly. And maybe with Malik Hooker back there, that might be a better balance between those two safeties.
Well, this is where it always comes down to the second part of drafting any type of player, is that where they go to when they get drafted, what team they go to, who are the coaches there, how do you develop this player? So ultimately, you make a great point, because it's going to come down to what is the best scheme fit.
Right.
A lot of people would say that about certain quarterbacks going into certain situations, how they run their offenses. It's the same thing for defensive players. So, yeah, it's a great point. But I think with either one of these guys, I really don't think that it would make much of a difference as far as what you would ultimately get production out of. Again, take the interceptions out of it. Look at the rest of the intangibles of the player. I know that it's all about turning the ball over, especially when it comes to the AFC West with the quarterbacks that we have to deal with week in and week out. But look at the player itself. Look at the dynamics that they bring to the game. I think Jamal Adams just possesses a little bit more than Malik Hooker does. Not taking anything away from Malik Hooker, and I would be stoked if the Chargers were able to nab him at 7. I think he would bring a huge boost to the defensive secondary. But if you're asking me today who I'd rather take, it's Jamal Adams, hands down.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to be excited once they draft somebody. Whoever they draft, I'm going to be excited. I'm going to be looking forward to seeing him out on the field. But to me, at number 7 in the entire draft, the position of safety seems it doesn't seem worthy of a number 7 pick. And I've said that in the past. Now, they draft either one of these guys, I'm going to be really excited. And to stay with the way we do things, we're bouncing around a lot here. Before we get into any other additional players, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Chargers' overall draft philosophy this year. Now, the Chargers, I don't know if you heard or not, but they moved from San Diego up north. I don't know if you've heard. I don't know if that was in the news. They got this stupid, lame, gotta fight for LA, whatever. So stupid.
Hey, you hear where their draft party is today, though, right? It's down in downtown Disney at ESPN.
That's right. That's right.
You being from San Diego, did they ever do anything like that as far as draft party goes, or nothing with the public?
No, but they weren't fighting for San Diego. They're fighting for LA, apparently.
Wow.
So they're and staying with that theme, they're fighting for LA. One thing that I see as a Charger fan is they need to get impact players in this draft. They can't really draft for the future. They can't draft for a guy that say, this guy's going to be really good in 2 or 3 years. If they're fighting for LA, with my stupid air quotes, they need to have guys that are going to contribute this year. And for fans, especially like me, fans of Phillip Rivers, who knows that we only have a couple good years, 2 or 3 more years left with him most likely, that's good for us because they're going to draft guys. They're not going to draft projects. They're going to draft guys that are ready to get on the field and contribute. Do you agree with that, or do you see them still maybe reaching for? I'm going to use an example. This is the example everybody, the guy that everybody hates, Craig Mager. Craig Mager was not drafted because they said, this guy's going to come on the field and make a difference right now. They drafted him saying, we have a chance to get maybe a first-round talent in the 3rd round, but we're not going to see that for maybe 3 years. They can't do something like this in this draft. Do you agree with that?
So by that circumstance, nobody wants to see a quarterback taken off the board at 7.
Correct. That's kind of what I'm leading towards right now. With what they have to do, with what results they need to get in San Diego, in LA, excuse me, what results they need to get to fight for LA. they can't draft with the number 7 overall pick a guy that's not going to see the field.
But then you have to wonder. I mean, think about this. This is really why the top 10 really just is such a mix-up, and why so many people are looking to trade down. If you look at Cleveland at 1, you look at San Francisco at 2, you look at Chicago at 3, you look at New York at 6. Every single one of those teams, conceivably, right now, has a huge gap at quarterback, needs a quarterback. But the value for these guys are just not there.
Right.
And that's why you see so much movement of wanting to trade down and what it is that they're looking to do, because the value just isn't there for these players in this type of draft. So, I mean, I'm with you from the standpoint of at 7 for the Chargers, if we're just singling them out on this one. It's not worth the 7th overall pick. Absolutely not. There's more skill positions where this team needs to get better. Again, you're still in the AFC West. You're still having to go up against the Denver Broncos with their defense. Still having to go up against Oakland. Oh, who, by the way, had just picked up beast mode a couple days ago, and still have Derek Carr and that offense that has torched the Chargers now for the past couple years. So you have to figure out a way to stop these guys. And what the players that are at the top of the draft, there is some very, very impactful players. And again, if you can come up with a trade package to bring some value back to the pick of where you're going to be making your selection, then possibly going a different direction, maybe on offensive line, where, again, it's another position that is weak in this draft, could be justified. You pick up an extra pick in the second round to where you can have that developmental quarterback of the future. Then it's justified. But at 7, absolutely not. But I totally understand where you're coming from, is that the Chargers need to get players that will impact now, and especially with a new regime.
Now, is there enough sexy players in this draft for teams to want to trade up to the number 7 spot? It seems to me like there might be some talent, a lot of talent in the draft, but it seems like it's a lot closer together. You don't have as much standout guys in this draft as I remember seeing in the past. Flashy, this guy's a can't miss. And when you see stuff like that, people are less likely to trade up. They think, well, the talent's really close anyways. Why give up a ransom to move up 3 spots when I can get somebody else here that's going to be almost as good?
You haven't really heard that term, like can't miss player, aside from maybe 3 or 4 guys. But that's the best part about this draft, is that it's so deep at so many different positions. Aside from quarterback and offensive line, like you said, nobody ever considers the offensive lineman as a sexy pick.
Right.
But you don't have the star quarterbacks in this draft that are really going to make an impact.
And those are the
one.
ones that usually stand out.
Right, and maybe with the exception of Deshaun Watson, who's had his type of production, played in his type of games the past couple of years. I mean, really has had the biggest stage, ultimately, of success. But everybody's talking up Mitchell Trubisky, who's had 13 starts under his belt at North Carolina. For what reason?
Yeah.
I shudder to think. Again,
seems like every time one of these quarterbacks who only started, less than 15 games, we'll say, get drafted in the NFL, they end up not working out very well.
50% of the picks overall in the first round doesn't matter what the position is, don't end up working out. So, like you said, I don't think the concept of the lack of the sexy pick is not there. It's just that there's so many that there's really not one that you can actually say it's a can't-miss player, because it's kind of the truth. There's not, because you can pick up this other guy who's the second-rated or the third-rated or the fourth-rated that's going to give you just as good a production.
Now, so Myles Garrett at number 7 off the board. Just for fun, what would you say if Cleveland did not draft Myles Garrett and the Chargers traded up to number 2 and gave up a number 1 next year to move from 7 to 2 and draft Myles Garrett? Would you be happy with that?
First off, I think that Cleveland would be getting a much bigger trade package than that if that was the case. But I would just say, hey, you better be sure.
Yeah. You
better be sure that you got somebody. Because let's not forget, Jonathan Allen was in the conversation just at the end of January as possibly being the number 1 overall pick out of Alabama. And the Chargers have met with Jonathan Allen privately. So, I mean, you just better be sure. And now that, of course, all these, rumors like they usually do weeks before the draft come out and they say, oh, Garrett's lazy, he takes plays off, he's not this guy. We obviously heard the comments that Warren Sapp had to say about him, that he's not worthy of a number one pick. Yeah. I would just say, hey, you better be sure. If you think that this guy is the can't-miss guy for your franchise, then go and get him. And I would say that about any position. If you think that that player in particular is your guy,
right,
go and get him. But
better be damn sure.
Yeah. You don't want to end up with a give me a trade. I mean, a Herschel Walker type of scenario.
Right.
Yes. But, I mean, Herschel was a great player. He just didn't fit in Minnesota. So what type of king's ransom are you looking to get if you're looking to trade up for any of these players?
Right.
I mean, hey, let's not forget Indianapolis traded for Trent Richardson when he had been with Cleveland for such a short period of time. They gave up a number one pick, but then Cleveland turned it right back around and used that pick on Johnny Manziel.
Right.
So, I mean, just know.
Just because you have the number one
exactly.
pick.
I mean, Cleveland's had multiple picks now in the first round for, God, so many years. And it's just, they've never been able to do anything with them. And it's just unfortunate. It's just like you can have all the gold in the world, but whatever you're going to do with it in the draft when it comes to football, it's not always a sure thing.
Right. Right. So I personally understand how they want to make a splash this year and they need some impact players. Trading up this year to me is just not something that I want to see the Chargers do. So Myles Garrett will be off the board. Possibly you'd be happy with Jamal Adams or Malik Hooker.
Mm-hmm.
Solomon Thomas, defensive lineman from Stanford. What are your thoughts on him? And is there any shot at all him dropping all the way down to 7?
There's been some buzz over the last several days. You've seen it even in tweaks and analyst mock drafts that have the Chargers taking Solomon Thomas. What possibly could be making the drop? We don't know. Could there be a quarterback that's in that top 5 that gets taken that brings Solomon down? For the longest time, we've been hearing nothing but Solomon Thomas to the San Francisco 49ers,
right.
Number 2 overall, easy. But let's not forget, they, too, are also under different management. John Lynch is now the GM over there for what they're doing. He's came out publicly and talked about how much he wants a quarterback. He's done his due diligence in scouting these guys, figuring out what he wants, and they don't have a quarterback there either. So, they're in a good position to where they could circle back around in 2 and pick him up. But, I mean, who knows? There's something is going to happen today, I believe, in the top 5 that is going to shake up the draft. That's going to drop somebody that you didn't expect to the Chargers at 7. And then it's going to come down to the question is, are you going to take him or are you going to trade down and accumulate more picks? But as far as Solomon Thomas goes, as far as his skill set, the guy's got a motor for days. I love what he's able to do from a defensive standpoint. You can put him all over the line, multiple different positions, and Chargers love versatility, especially when it comes to defensive linemen. We've seen that. So I think if for some reason he was to fall at number 7, break the 40 record by running up to that podium and giving him your card, for my opinion. I would love Solomon Thomas to be there at 7.
Moving to the 4-3 with Solomon Thomas and going back to Joey Bosa, those are the type of players that can move around a little bit. Joey Bosa doesn't have to stick on the outside. They can kind of everybody compares everybody to the great players, but kind of like what they do with J.J. Watt. They put him in different spots all the time. And if you got a couple players versatile like that, the mayor, SoCal Travis, in the chat room, and he says he agrees with you. If Thomas is still on the board when the Chargers draft, they gotta sprint up to the podium.
Right.
Justin, who's been moving. Justin, the other half of the San Diego Sports Junkies, he's been moving. He couldn't get the time off from work today.
Miss you,
but
buddy.
He is in the chat room, and he wants them to draft Mike Williams still.
Of course he does. He's doing that just to piss me off right now.
He did throw in a LOL there, and then he says Jamal Adams if Mike Williams is
okay. Well, I'm glad to know that Jamal Adams is his number 2 choice behind Mike freaking Williams.
All right, what does SoCal Trav say? The Browns will trade into the 5 spot for Trubisky. The Jets will take Watson at 6. You think quarterbacks will go back-to-back 5-6?
That's completely possible. Tennessee's made it known that they want to be moving down, and why not? If they have 2 picks in this draft, so they have enough ammunition to where they can be flexible enough to move out of a pick. New York, to me, is an X factor. To me, they have really done nothing to address their quarterback situation, whether it be in free agency or through the 5 or 6 quarterbacks that they've drafted over the last couple of years. I really see them as a dark horse, possibly taking Deshaun Watson at 6 or Trubinsky, whoever it is that they may fall in love with. But I just think the stars align for the Jets to take a quarterback at 6. And maybe this is why you've been hearing so much talk about the Cleveland Browns trading up from 12 to come and get a quarterback, because they're afraid that someone's going to take him.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing, especially when you need a quarterback. Lots of teams will overpay for quarterbacks because they are afraid. They're so limited. There's only a couple that you think that are going to fit with your team, and you don't want one of them off the board. The next name Justin says in the chat room, and it's something I was going to try and hold till towards the end of the show, but I might as well say it now. The guy that I got sold on last week by somebody from the chat room, I don't remember who it was, Christian McCaffrey. At number 7. For some reason, I was never really a huge fan of his, and that's probably because at the beginning of the season, he was getting a lot of love, and Donnell Pumphrey was kind of getting ignored, and I'm in San Diego here, I like the Aztecs, so it kind of made me hate on McCaffrey a little bit. But the more I hear about him, the more I think about him as a fit here, replacing Danny Woodhead, I love it. I actually love it. I wouldn't be upset at all at number 7 if we took McCaffrey. I know that could be considered a bit of a reach because he could go as low as, maybe 20? He's not going to fall out of the first round, though.
He's not falling out of the top 10.
But really? Okay.
For McCaffrey,
so
no
20
way.
He thinks too far. So,
oh, yeah.
So he could go as low as 10. He could go as high as 5, maybe even. So I don't think, first of all, what's your thoughts on him? Do you think that he's a reach at 7? And you had some interesting thoughts on him before we went live, so maybe you could share those with us.
Well, you actually made a good label, the can't-miss type of player. Now, Christian McCaffrey is not necessarily the can't-miss type of player, but he sure right now is being treated like one.
Right.
From all the talk that you've been hearing, all this activity, that movement in the top 10, all really is a lot relating around him. There's been talk of Denver trying to move into the top 10. Could it possibly be for McCaffrey? Who knows? The Chargers have an option at 7. Do I personally see it as a good investment? Well, when you look at what his dynamic skill set is, as far as what he can do as a kick returner, a punt returner, how you're going to utilize him in the slot as the Danny Woodhead type of role, they call that the 4-down back. You can really use him anywhere.
Yeah.
But I'm really looking more for what the Chargers need. And yes, they do need a replacement for Danny Woodhead because he's not on the roster. Yes,
right.
That's how I say it. And this running back class is also so deep. You can get another guy like Jeremy McNichols. He may not be as dynamic as Christian McCaffrey is in his skill set, but he can give you something similar to what Danny Woodhead provided to the offense. So, I mean, I wouldn't mind having Christian McCaffrey. I mean, he's going to be a dynamic weapon no matter who he goes to. He is going to add some juice to that offense. But would I want to see it for the Chargers? I'd kind of be a little bit confused, not going to lie.
Yeah.
I would rather have us build up the trade fodder for Christian McCaffrey, use that, and then have someone be hungry enough to come up and get him.
Do you think that maybe they're doing that?
I would hope so. I would hope that that's their ploy. Remember, we know that over the 2 weeks leading up to the draft, that 99.9% of all the stuff that's said out there is complete BS.
Right.
But look at what the Chargers did last year. Everybody thought for sure that the Chargers were going, what was the safety's name that ultimately went to Jacksonville?
He's the guy that I wanted last year too, Ramsey.
Yes. Everybody thought that it was going to be Jalen Ramsey there at 3. They had been mocked there. There had been talks there. And all of a sudden, here comes Joey Bosa, which ultimately ended up being fantastic because he creates 10.5 sacks in 12 games that he played for the Chargers last year. So they keep their info pretty close to the chest. And if their plan is to ultimately trade down, which I know myself, I know you, Justin, a lot of people have been wanting to see them trade down for years. To acquire new picks, you need it.
I'm happy you said trade down now because Trav is in the chat room right now, and he says Chargers can't trade out of the 7 spot. If they want to get good, they need the best player possible at 7, and he says Solomon Thomas, which I agree, except that I don't think Solomon Thomas will still be there at 7. I just don't.
There's a good chance that he will not be there. I'm going to say that's a 95% chance that Solomon Thomas is not going to be there. I think it's hard for San Francisco to pass on him. I think it's hard for Chicago to pass on him. You look at the Jets for what they have in their defensive front. They probably won't go Solomon Thomas. I'd kind of be surprised. Tennessee probably won't do it. Jacksonville is another team that I could see absolutely doing it. For what they have there in that defense and what they've been able to build up, if you were to add a guy like Solomon Thomas to that defense over there, it can create some fireworks. But I just don't see the Chargers being lucky enough to have Solomon Thomas fall into the lap. Unless, you get a situation like a Laramie Tunsil 10 minutes before the draft and Solomon Thomas has just a weed mask on and then he starts to plummet. Maybe that's about it. But no, I don't see it being a realistic option.
So this will surprise you, but SoCal Trev says, if they trade out of the 7th spot, I say F Telesco.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
No, I can tell you nobody's hacked SoCal Trav. That's him.
No, that's 100% him.
And then Justin says, please trade down. And then, oh, that's so funny.
From Mike Williams, is that what he said? Of course he would say that.
So let's move on to some other guys that are looking to go. Number 7, Leonard Fournette. I know there's a lot of people that have been. Nobody's exactly sure where he's going to go. If Leonard Fournette was available at number 7, there's no such thing as a 100% chance of anything, and there's no such thing as a 0% chance. I'd say there's a 1% chance the Chargers would draft Leonard Fournette, though. Is that fair? You don't think that there's any chance of them drafting him if he's available?
No.
Okay. We're agreed.
Where's the minus button on that one?
The funny thing about this is I have all these notes that I'm flipping back and forth through to get all these names and stuff, and you're doing all this stuff right off the top of your head. It's a little bit emasculating, I'm going to be honest with you. Marshawn Lattimore.
Glad I can help.
Marshawn Lattimore, cornerback out of Ohio. He's another guy that's probably going to go top 10. Would you be upset if the Chargers added another cornerback to the of course we look and we say they're going to probably draft a cornerback in this draft, I would think, because they always do. Number 7 pick in the first round, though, that's another one of those things where it'd be nice to get the talent, but they have more pressing needs, right?
Does number 7 for a guy you would use specifically at the slot corner sound worthy of a 7th pick?
It doesn't.
It doesn't. And not to say that that's what he's limited to.
But the slot, the nickel cornerback now is not the same as the nickel cornerback 10 years ago.
No, and it's not. A lot of more respect has been given to the slot cornerback position, and it should be. They're on the field 60% of the time. But considering who the Chargers already have at their spots with Jason Verrett, Casey Hayward, Marshawn Lattimore is a cornerback that can play both spots, inside, outside, doesn't matter. But I think for that type of draft value, if for some reason he was to be there, I would just say, okay, well, who's getting demoted to the slot spot? Who are you going to utilize there? And both Hayward and Verrett have proved multiple times how dominant they can be on the outside. You just have to have them on the field and healthy at the same time to really prove their worth. But I would be surprised at that one for sure.
Now, somebody who we haven't really talked about too much because it's another one of those positions that's not a need. First of all, what are your thoughts on O.J. Howard?
I think he's a great tight end, honestly. I think he was in an offense that really limited what he could do. I don't think we really got a chance to see the scope of it just because of the way that Alabama runs their offense. But if he's put into a situation where he can be a focal point of the offense and where it's an air-out type of offense, I think he can definitely create some fireworks. There's been a buzz about Tennessee possibly selecting him in mock drafts at 5, which if you think about that, who they already have on that team, if you pair him with a DeMarco Murray, with Marcus Mariota, with what he can do down the field, I think he'd be a fantastic fit for that type of offense. But again, then you've got other guys like David Njoku who are just freak athletes. He's more of the traditional pass catching tight end. O.J. Howard's a little bit more polished on some of his skill sets, more of a complete tight end. But again, this tight end class is one of the deepest ones that I've seen in the last decade as far as the talent that you can pick up. But yeah, O.J. Howard's going to be a fantastic player no matter where he goes. I just hope he goes into a situation where a team can really maximize his skill set beyond what it was in college.
If the Chargers took O.J. Howard at number 7, if the Chargers said, you know what, forget this, we want to have a 2 tight end attack, we want to do like what the Patriots did a few years ago before they had the Killer and the Gronk as their tight ends. If the Chargers drafted him at number 7, what would you think? What would Jake Hefner's reaction be?
If Mike Williams was Guinness, O.J. Howard would be like, not Pabst, but what's like a good beer to be like 1A and 1B to where I'd be pissed off at. I mean, that would just be like a Mike Williams light pick to me, is what that would be. I mean, I get where you're coming from. Antonio Gates most likely is on his way out the door following this season.
Right.
You're going to want to have another dynamic pair. Hunter Henry proved his worth. Turned in a great rookie season, how he did last year. So all of a sudden, hey, we can get a tandem the way that they had it in New England with Gronk and Aaron Hernandez. But hey, I just don't see that being the value of the 7th overall pick.
To me, I don't know. I've taken that number 7 overall pick and I put it on such a pedestal. I almost don't think anything's really worthy of it. Because all these players we keep seeing that would be good fits for the Chargers or fills a need. To me, I would say, yeah, but I don't want to use a number 7 pick on that guy. Couple of predictions from SoCal Travis says, if the Browns take Trubisky, which you don't think is going to happen, right?
No.
He says Solomon will be available at 7. Justin once again wants us to draft Williams. Who is Williams your number 1 quarterback on the board right now? I mean, wide receiver. Excuse me.
I've been going back and forth with this, and it's gotten really close. I really like Corey Davis, but unfortunately, he's been just fighting the injury aspect.
It's the last thing we need here.
Exactly. And if he had a full season, there'd be no doubt in my mind that he should be the number 1. But of course, the injury concerns are going to drop him down on the chart a little bit. I love what John Ross is able to do from his speed standpoint, but that's been really the focus of him. Do you want to bring back a bigger type of wide receiver a la the Vincent Jackson days? Mike Williams fits that pedigree. But there's some things in Mike Williams' game that I don't like, that he hasn't really developed yet, that I don't think is worthy of him being that 7th overall pick. Now, if Justin wants to hound me for this and say, hey, let's trade down to 16 with Baltimore, and let's accrue another 2nd-round pick and, what have you, we get more options in the 2nd round. If Mike Williams is still sitting there at a 16, I'm much more comfortable with drafting a wide receiver at that point in time. I really am. But I don't believe that that's going to happen regardless of what the trade down is. Again, I think that their needs in the BPA as far as the players who are going to be available are greater and are going to be, that's just not going to be on the Chargers' radar. And again, we're talking about another position class here that is so deep that you can pick up a wide receiver in the 2nd round for what Phillip Rivers is able to do. And again, you still have 5 wide receivers on your roster right now. Knock on wood that Keenan Allen stays healthy.
Yes.
You can still create a dynamic with a 2nd-round wide receiver coming in there and producing with Phillip Rivers as your quarterback and Melvin Gordon in the run game.
Well, I like what the Chargers did with Tyrell Williams, and even with
that's another reason that Justin is really shocking me right now. It's just like Mike Williams, your boy, is going to take reps away from your former boy Tyrell Williams. So trade one Williams for another is what Justin's really trying to do right now.
I like when the Chargers draft a bigger wide receiver. They usually draft them low, or they get them as an undrafted free agent and kind of try and develop them. Because in my opinion, when you get the big physical wide receivers out of college, it doesn't always transfer into the NFL, because the NFL players they don't have the physical advantages that they had in college when they come into the NFL.
Roy Williams.
Yes, exactly. They come in there and all of a sudden guys hit a little bit harder. They're not the dominant force anymore, and they're not able to deal with it. Not always, but I see that a lot. That's why, to me, I always say draft a wide receiver lower and try and develop them. Then if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. When are we going to start seeing offensive tackles coming off the board?
There's been talk about 3 teams that I've heard moving up. Now, this is not necessarily offensive linemen that they're moving up for, but it's teams that could potentially use an offensive lineman. Denver being one of them at 20. I've heard about them trying to move up into the top 10. Don't know for what. Don't know why. I wouldn't assume that they would be looking to take an offensive lineman in the top 10.
Right.
I wouldn't assume, period, that there would be an offensive lineman off the board before number 15.
Okay.
But here come these teams that are all of a sudden offensive line needy, and we know how weak this class is, that once you really scrape the top of this class off, the drop down on it is pretty huge.
Yes.
So there could be all of a sudden a lot of movement for offensive linemen from 20 down to 32. So, and again, Chargers need offensive linemen. There's been no mistake about that. But at 7, that's not going to be any part of their plan to take an offensive lineman with that value. But if you're one of these players one of these teams that's looking to trade up, that could definitely appease the Chargers. You move back down to the late teens, the early 20s, Chargers could grab an offensive lineman there, which I would be completely fine with.
Me too.
Absolutely.
As long as his name doesn't rhyme with Cam Robinson.
I think we've had our fair share of our Alabama offensive linemen that we've had to deal with.
You know, the thing is, like I said, I love DJ Fluker as a guy and I love his attitude, but he just can't block. He couldn't with us, anyways. Cam Robinson, Ryan Ramczyk. What's your thoughts on him? Is he first round worthy?
Yes, he really is.
Is there a chance he falls into the second round?
I can't see that. I mean, I would absolutely be floored if for some reason he wasn't a first rounder. And I know that some people, have their knocks on him and that he's not that good. But I've seen what I need to see. But now, here's the interesting thing: is that Ramczyk really dominated at the left tackle position for where he was at in Wisconsin. What do you do now for the Chargers standpoint? You paid a lot of money to Russell Okung at the left tackle spot. Can he flip over to the right tackle? Yeah, he's definitely got the skill set for that. But I would rather have an offensive lineman that is plug and play. I'd much rather go up and get a guard in the first round, like a Forrest Lamp. Okay. Or you come back around in the second round and you get a Dan Feeney, for example. Somebody who could really plug and play. I know we're not happy with Barksdale's production, but I wouldn't be disappointed with a Ryan Ramczyk to say, okay, hey, yeah, this is now our new right tackle, Ryan Ramczyk, and now Barksdale is in swing duty. I've loved Ramczyk from when I've been watching him. You saw what he did in the bowl game. Again, this was before he had surgery. So he's been playing through all of this pain that he's been feeling all season long. So there's no questioning his toughness when you throw that on. And with this offensive line, we need toughness. We see how easy it is for guys to go down so much. So Ryan Ramczyk, for me, would be a great pick if you're picking him anywhere between 20 and 32.
And this isn't a fair thing for me to say about Ryan Ramczyk, but I'm going to say it anyways. He's coming out of Wisconsin. The last 2 people that we drafted out of Wisconsin, their first seasons here were kind of lost seasons. So I don't want to put that all in Wisconsin, but now I'm a little bit wary. I don't want us to be looking forward to Ryan Ramczyk season 2 because season 1's going to be a lost season.
No, I don't think. No, because from what I've heard, his medical checks out. He's ready to go. So I mean, he should be ready for camp. It's not going to be like a Max Turk situation where he's going to have to redshirt. So which
actually was a good fit for what we needed.
And it's exactly what we wanted. Going back to last year when we were talking about it, it was seriously the best situation that could have happened for Max. And now all of a sudden you've been hearing about it in practice that they've already been shuffling the offensive line around. Matt Slosson's over at guard now. Spencer Pulley was used in the center position just this week during practice. So there's obviously going to be some flux there, and I would hope that they would want to utilize the guy who they spent a third-round pick on next year to really get him some playing time and get him back in the field. Because, again, if Max Turk was not injured last year, there's no doubt in my mind that he would have contested for the number 1 center to be off the board last year.
I liked the versatility that we had from Spencer Pulley, but he was an undrafted guy, and he kind of, when it was time for him to actually go in and play, he kind of played like an undrafted guy last year when I saw him out there on the field at center. So I'm not quite sure that I'm comfortable with him being center, the actual center, starting center, but I don't mind having him, be a kind of a plug-in anywhere type, play both guard positions and the center as a backup. One thing we haven't really talked about, and that is linebackers. Reuben Foster, another guy from Alabama. It seems like, first of all, when you look at the top 10 at every position, there's somebody from Alabama, which tells you they had a really, really good team. But at the same time, that kind of worries me a little bit because when you have that dominating of a team, when you're, I'm trying to see if I could make my thoughts into words here. If you're an offensive lineman and you're playing with 4 other really good offensive linemen, all you have to worry about is the guy that you're blocking. When you're an offensive lineman, you're playing with 4 other guys that maybe aren't as good. You have a little bit more to do, if that makes sense to you a little
yes.
bit. If what I'm saying makes sense to you. You look at Alabama, it's a team that's stacked with talent. So when you have guys go out on the field at any position, they don't have to worry about as much. They just have to do what they do because they know the guy next to them is going to do their job. and sometimes I worry about maybe these guys aren't as good as you think that they are. They're only maybe that good because they were on such a good team. Does that make sense to you?
It makes perfect sense. I mean, not everybody that has been under the Nick Saban coaching wing over there at Alabama has proven to be a dominating player, whether it's offense or defense.
Well, think about pass rushers. Think about pass rushers. If all the pass rushers on your team are good, then you're not going to get double teamed because they can't double team you. You know,
right.
and that's kind of the idea that I'm talking about. Reuben Foster, you think he's a first round talent?
Absolutely. Playing that type of position and the tackling machine that he is, it's like, to me, it would be like another Denzel Perryman being back there for the way that he plays. He plays with an attitude. He plays with just terrific instincts and as a tackling machine. Whoever picks him up, despite what his problems may be, I think he's going to go somewhere personally anywhere from 15. I mean, there was even talk today that in circles that the Saints were looking at him at number 11. So his draft stock may have not taken as big of a hit as many people thought it did. I mean, and there was people even still talking about San Francisco taking him number 2 overall before the incident happened at the Combine and, of course, before the diluted test. But, at some point you just have to look at it and to say, why is it that everybody with a character problem that ultimately ends up going to New England, that they say that, it's a fantastic pickup because we know that they're not going to do that stuff over in New England. This is where it comes down to your coaches.
Right.
Regardless of whether the problems that this kid has off of the field, you still have to have a player development team to get him in line. And again, it depends on the issues, of course. I'm not absolving everybody.
Right.
But in a situation like this, I don't think it's as dire of a situation to where you're going to take someone completely off your board because of something that transpired at the Combine and the diluted sample.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit on our last show, too, saying that the Chargers don't necessarily, of course you don't want criminals on your team, but at the same time, maybe we need to not be so quick of just, completely writing some players off. By the way, Trav says Garrett Bowles is a better linebacker, better offensive lineman. What are your thoughts on that?
People have said that. He's probably the most athletic offensive lineman in this draft. For how he's built, for how he's able to move, for a guy that's his size, there's no debate in that whatsoever. But the guy is 25 years old. He is a little bit older of an offensive lineman that you're going to draft. But I think just from the skill set that Ryan Ramczyk brings, from what I've seen on film compared to Garrett Bowles, there's now even been talk of Garrett Bowles falling out of the second round. For what? I don't know. Wow. I think that Garrett Bowles is definitely worthy of a pick somewhere in the 20s. I think he is definitely worth a first-round pick somewhere toward the tail.
7th pick in the second round, if he's available, Chargers snatch him up in a second round.
I would see that's totally worthy for 7th in the second round. Absolutely, 100%.
7th in the first round is a little bit of a stretch, though.
That's very much of a stretch.
So getting back to who the Chargers are actually going to draft, do you have any predictions you want to make for today?
Here you go with this again. This is one where literally it's and I've had the occurrences here, and people have seen me do it where it's just – I remember I've had one draft where the person that I actually wanted was the guy who was actually selected.
Who was that?
That was Jason Verrett. I wanted Jason Verrett from the get-go, 4 months, was researching him. And remember who you had go in front of him that draft was Justin Gilbert, who went to Cleveland. And then you had the corner that went to Cincinnati. I can't remember. I'm failing on his name.
You also had the corner that went to Denver before him, too.
No, Bradley Roby was actually taken after him. He
was
taken after him. But I can't remember the cornerback that went to Cincinnati. I think that was 1 or 2 picks before the Chargers. And there was Jason Verrett. And honestly, I was stoked. Other than that, every time that I've done this draft party, it has not been what I wanted. Yeah. Honestly, I was not throwing my arms up in the air and cheering when DJ Fluker was ultimately the pick. You know my feelings about Joey Bosa from last year. If
we remember when DJ Fluker was drafted, the Chargers needed offensive line help so bad, and they basically said, we will take whatever offensive lineman is available at the time. Were there other – by the time it got to our draft, I know this doesn't matter because it already happened, but when they drafted Fluker, were you like, oh, they should have drafted this guy, or were you like, well, they drafted what was left?
That was basically the philosophy that you came to.
Wasn't Trey Turner still available after him? I'm trying to remember.
I can't remember if he was. I think he was.
Yeah.
But I looked at it as, okay, offensive linemen are the top ones that you'd want that are really going to produce are off the board.
Right. They all flew off the board.
Right. So go BPA. It wasn't
Yeah.
Fluker at their pick. That's for sure. They went strictly for need. But this is one of the ways that you kind of figured out how Tom Telesco started drafting. Remember, that was his first year.
Yes.
The Chargers, historically, over the last several years, have always really targeted the position that they were the weakest at, whether it had been offense or defense. That year, because the Chargers had the lowest-ranked offensive line in the league, they still went offensive linemen, regardless of the fact that the two higher-quality guys were already taken by that point. It was the same thing for when Jason Verrett was taken. They had the worst secondary the year before. I think it was ranked like 29th.
Right.
When Joey Bosa was taken, their pass rush, their sacks, it was one of the lowest in the league the year before. Melvin Gordon, their running attack was one of the lowest in the league. So there is a pattern on how Telesco's been drafting as of late.
So what is it this year? What's their weakest spot this year?
If I was to look at, I mean, again, you go to offensive line, but is that really worth it at 7?
Yeah.
No, I can't see that happening.
Yeah, take that off.
Offensive line is one of the weakest positions on the Chargers if you're looking offensively. No question there. Probably the weakest position.
Yes.
But it's not going to be worthy of a number 7 overall. None whatsoever.
Nope.
If you flip it over to the defense. Well, what are the Chargers really weak at? Safety. Secondary. They really were. It was easy to pass on them. It was. Run defense, they got
better,
significantly better,
yes,
with the addition of Joey Bosa, with additions that they were able to pull together. Obviously, Brandon Mebane was a huge acquisition in shoring some up the run defense in that regard. So you look at the pass defense again. And then that's what has always brought me to safety over the last couple of months, is because there is the glaring weakness. You know my feelings about Dwight Lowry. I just don't think that he is the guy for the starter in this job. And you have a liability still in Jaleel Addae for the way that he plays. And you don't really have that well of depth behind them in Darryl Stuckey and some of the other safeties like Dexter McCoyle or Adrian McDonald. So you really need to shore that up with a playmaker. And whether that's Jamal Adams or Malik Hooker, who knows if they're going to be available. It's going to be like another situation. If neither one of those guys are available at 7,
don't take a safety.
For the safety,
then, right.
Don't take a safety at 7. Come back
Yeah.
around in the second round and take a safety at that point. Because I don't believe that any other safety other than those two guys in this draft are worthy of a first-round pick.
Right.
Maybe you see a Justin Evans or a Budda Baker sneak into the back part of the first round. Fine, then trade down, and you could pick him up then. But just make the value match the pick. That's what I say.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I know you kind of generalized and talked about position and all of that stuff, and so I'm gonna make my first of all, I've never picked who the Chargers were Well, I take it back. I predicted the Chargers would draft Ryan Leaf. I was sold on that. On him being
Thanks a lot.
I know. Yeah, he did call me. Beathard called me specifically and asked me who I wanted, but I was sold on him being the better long-term quarterback. I figured, but we all know where that went. That gets talked about every year at the draft.
You weren't the only person who thought that. A lot of people thought that.
I don't think I've gotten who the Chargers are going to draft right at all. So I am going to go a little bit crazy. It is somebody who I talked about already, but it's going to be one of those guys that if he gets drafted, I think a lot of people are going to go, why? And that's Christian McCaffrey. That is going to be my prediction for who the Chargers draft. Just because, why not? Why not? Do you want to make a prediction? No, you don't want to.
I don't want to make a prediction.
You need to make one anyways.
I don't want to make a prediction. This top 10 right now, again, if it wasn't so offset for need, value, who's ranked, this one's impossible. Even the analysts don't even know what's happening in this draft.
Right.
It's going to be such a crapshoot in the top 10.
There's nobody heads and shoulders above. I don't think, anyways. There's no obvious choices. You have some guys that are really, really good, but there's Cleveland. There's 3 or 4 different players that Cleveland could draft, and everybody be like, all right, I could see that.
Well, yeah, because they've got so many holes on that team.
Right.
You can make Cleveland Browns fans happy today in a multitude of different ways for who you take at 1 and 12.
Yes.
We obviously know who one's going to be. But even if you didn't go quarterback at 12, you could still make them happy for whatever position that they're going to draft at that point. Chargers at 7, you really got to hit something.
Yeah. Now, then I'm going to make you. Predict a couple other things since you don't want to make a prediction for the draft. Chargers, will they stay at 7 or will they trade out? I know they want to. Everybody always wants to, but will they?
I have a growing suspicion. I know I've said this to you guys every year. Trade out, trade out, trade out. Something is telling me in my gut that this is finally going to be the year that the Chargers trade out.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if the Chargers do not trade out of number 7, do you think that there will be any trades 1 through 6, or do you think that they're going to fall right into the guys that are drafting?
There's going to be a trade in the top 5, I say easily. What was it? A couple years ago, I can't remember if it was 2012, 2014, where they had broken the record for the amount of trades that were done in the first round. I think today you may actually see that record get broken again.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, one of the things is we talked about. I kept saying that the talent is a little bit closer, but that might make people want to move up just 1 or 2 spots. I think that I don't know if you're going to see guys move from 20 to number 3, but you might see a guy move from 20 to 18. Or from 16 to 14 or something like that. It might be just a couple spots up just to grab a guy before, when the Rams are on the board, they know the Rams are looking at a guy, so or right before the Rams are on the board, maybe make a trade with the Jags, something like that. I do see something like that happening, and that's what makes stuff like this exciting.
Yes.
That's one of the smartest things that the NFL did was allow trades on draft day. I mean, if they didn't allow that, that would take away so much of the drama and so much of the guessing. Anybody that we did not talk about, I know that we're not going to be talking again until the draft is done, but we've really mostly stuck with the early part of the draft. And when we get deeper into the draft, first of all, my lack of knowledge for the whole draft is pretty obvious anyways, but when we get deeper into the draft, I know a lot less about the players available. But do you have anybody later on or some other things that you want to talk about before we go?
It's day 1, man. This is going to be enough. We're going to have multiple heart attacks for the next 3.5 hours. So let's get through this and then see, obviously, how the board talks to us for who's left available for day 2, and we can pick it up from there.
Yeah, I look forward to watching the draft with you. I appreciate you inviting me up here.
Absolutely.
Next year we're gonna drag Justin up here too, and we'll do it again because this is a lot of fun. And like I said, I look forward to actually sitting around, hanging out with your friends, and actually watching the draft. So I appreciate you bringing me up here, Jake. And,
100%.
And having us up there. Anything else you want to say about the Chargers before we let this show go?
Don't screw it up.
Yeah. Well, I can't make any promises, but we'll have to see. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Thank Justin, of course, jumping into the chat room. He couldn't be up here. Trav, he said he was going to come over. I don't know if Trav is still coming over or not. Hopefully, we hope to see Trav here later on. If not, I actually do want to hear from him after the draft is over, just to see if all of the guys that he said were going to be available, like Jamal Adams, like Solomon Thomas at 7. I'd be really interested to see if he's correct on that because that'd be pretty cool. I don't see him dropping to 7. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We will be tuning in next Wednesday, talk about who the Chargers drafted and what our thoughts are on it.